It's not the point. Let them experience rape. Let them experience being raped and raping. Let them experience the sexual horrors that have gone on with man as long as man has existed. If you start releasing that type of trauma from the mind, then you start getting results here and now if it's done the way it should be. The phobic behavior, compulsive behavior, depression, these all respond very rapidly to this, because it's very pinpointed. It's very direct.
That carried over from a previous experience.
Right.
It was so traumatic at that one time. And did you find it working the other way, that it was so euphoric that the euphoria of it all stays on in this lifetime, too, or they wouldn't be coming to see you, I guess?
Well, sometimes that's a problem with us, because all we see is the horror and the pain and the yelling and, the trauma. And people ask us outright, have I never been happy? I say, yeah, but the happy lives don't cause you problems. You want to pay me to find yourself being happy? I'd much rather get over your problems and let your happiness take over.
And affect your next life.
Right. And this one.
And this one as well.
Sure.
All right. It is, it's always very gratifying for me, of course. We've been talking about this for many years on this program. The effect of the past life, the effect this life is going to have on a future life. That reincarnation is a fact of life, whether you want to believe it or not. It doesn't make any difference. One of these days you'll come to understand it, and
you'll catch on. Yeah,
you'll catch on eventually, and maybe we can help you think about that. I want you to be thinking about some questions for Dr. Netherton. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Bill Jenkins on Open Mind. On Open Mind tonight, I'm Bill Jenkins. We're talking about past life therapy, the effect of past lives on your lives. We see that it really is happening. You're treating it now. You're using this concept and this idea that you brought something with you when you came in, and sometimes it bothers you.
Yeah, you were not a blank slate.
It just didn't come in clean.
No, you didn't come in clean.
And the only way to do it, what a feeling that must be. There's something that's bothering you, and it could be physical, it could be emotional. You don't know what it is. You know that you've never experienced anything. You have a great fear of, in your case, you say a lot of people have problems with sex. There's no reason for you to have a sexual dysfunction that you can think of. And you find out that it wasn't your thought at all. It was the thought of another guy that was along that you used to be.
Right.
And you're able to get down to the heart of that very quickly, right?
Yes, and very quickly, in a matter of minutes.
And you do not use hypnotism. You just, what do you do, look them in the eye?
No, you actually ask the mind to begin to focus itself onto the problem. And as you do that, an altered state of consciousness does occur. What I have said is that we don't use formal hypnotic inductions. There is an altered state of consciousness, of course, but that state of consciousness comes and goes as it's needed with the conscious mind. And many times it's simply done by asking someone to locate a feeling in their body, and then asking them to use the physical location in the body to locate a similar body in another time and place. And as that is done, they find that the reality changes, and they begin to bring in more and more reality from another time and place, more and more memory. And what begins to happen with that is they begin to see that they've been trying to make that memory real, here and now. And that's when the problems have occurred.
Now, when they start talking to you in this way, do they identify the person they were, the time that they were? Do you get into it that deeply, or are you just dealing now with a feeling or with a therapeutic problem?
Well, you're dealing with a therapeutic process. Now, actually, you're in many times too deep to get a name and dates or locations. I tell people that I work with, if they want that, and some do, if they want that, to tell me, because if they don't, we'll never get it. If they do, then we make a special effort at some time toward the end of our sessions to extract that data.
But that isn't the prime purpose of it all. You want to find out what the problem is.
Right.
And if you can get some historical data along the way, that's icing on the cake. Have you been able to follow through with some of that, get some, and find out that it's verifiable?
Oh, yes. Yeah. First time that happened was, I had been working about 3 years, and someone sent, I've forgotten now, I think it was into the South somewhere, and got a death certificate based on the information that we had gleaned from the session.
The person did exist.
Yeah, and the death certificate came back, and my client showed up a week later after he got it, carrying this thing, and he said, look, there I am.
There you are.
I'm buried in a cemetery somewhere in Waco, Texas or something.
In Waco.
I'm not sure it was Waco, but it was near there.
Well, that's a good place to be buried. Don't tell Waco Pat. Don't mention that to Waco Pat. Well, it's going to be difficult, I think, for people to listen to people like yourself and the others we've had on the show that just have a hard time dealing with this, that this actually does go on. But more importantly is that these influences of these past lives, have you ever found out that an influence went from life to life to life before it got here, that it sort of strung through maybe a series of 3 and 4 lives?
It always does.
And was never resolved?
It always does. That's why it still bothers you, because it's not resolved. It comes from a developmental pattern. The problem today is the result of an unresolved developmental pattern which exists stretching back through time as far almost as you want to go with it.
We're always the same then, unless we've made some sort of evolving processes in a lifetime.
Yes, it's much like a baby in uterus. The baby is always processing. It's always growing. It's always still the same thing. It's still always a baby. It's still always a fetus. But it is always changing to different stages of development. And that's much what we are at the infinite level. We're always changing, always moving into a different stage of development. And you take that problem and the need to resolve it with you into the new stage of development.
We talk a lot about spiritual intelligence, and I look upon the spiritual intelligence as the sum total of all of your living experience.
That's right.
And certainly that develops a character and a nature and a personality, good, bad, or indifferent. And you do carry that with you.
Mm-hmm.
We see that happening more and more, and you now are treating it, because sometimes that character that you've carried along needs a little fine-tuning, or a kick in the hiney, or whatever it is, to get it on a little better trail. Kind of interesting work, isn't it?
Yes, it's very interesting.
Did you dream that you would be moving into this kind of research and this kind of therapy as you were in school, and you had all these great ideas of helping everyone with their feelings, I'm sure, as a profession?
Actually, I was in a different profession altogether when I first began developing this and using it. And I moved into this profession and became this type of therapist. And for the first 3 to 4 years, I still didn't believe it myself. I mean, it took me a long time to accept the fact that I had actually was now in this doing it. And no, if you'd asked me when I was a teenager, or even when I was beginning my 30s, if I was going to do this, I'd have said no.
Well, did you believe in the effect of a past life on the present life before you started treating from that angle, or did the treatment determine or shape your belief system?
I went through a past life experience of my own, which keyed this whole thing into place. I still wasn't sure about it. I still thought it could be imagination, it could be fantasy, it could be a book I read, it could be movies. But then I began to work with it. Because it was very beneficial for me. And I began to more and more realize that reincarnation as a fact was the only thing that would answer the many questions and the many things that I saw happening. But I really couldn't say that I actually believed it as a fact until I had been actually working with it about 3 years.
Then it sort of came home very heavy with you.
Yeah, then I sort of had to do the proverbial believe it or get off the pot,
You remind me in a way of Dr. Frank Baranowski.
No, he's a good friend.
Who's done an awful lot of research.
Right.
He was a devout Catholic.
Yes.
And his research, not only would he get the past life stories, but then the research would prove that those people actually existed hither and yon and everywhere. And it was very, very difficult for his religious upbringing and his religious belief, but the fact of the matter was still there. You ready to talk to the folks out there?
Certainly.
See what they have for you. We'll get to your calls in just a moment. And let me give you the numbers in case you want to get in and talk to Dr. Morris Netterton in Los Angeles Saturday night. Could it be a past life influence that caused me to enjoy smoking cigarettes so much and burning myself as I just did? Could I have been a tobacco farmer in South Carolina the last time through? Or so?
No, but you could sure have died in a forest fire and got out that way.
It's not easy being like this, I'd like to know who's responsible for that.
You make it look very easy.
Let's go to the callers and see what's on their line. Peter, welcome aboard.
Yes, Bill. Your show is very good.
Thank you.
And I've never called before. This is the first time. But I've felt like I've always been influenced by the Greek ancient Greeks, and I've always felt that way. I'm 25 now, and